the podcast for neurodivergent weirdos and queers who forget about struggling to adult. They're struggling to human.
At least that's what everyone's telling us.
You're right.
Per usual. But seriously, I'm Angela. People call me Mama Pistachio, bringing sense to the conversation. I help individuals and organizations cultivate skills, spaces, and confidence to advocate for themselves and each other.
And I'm Molly, giving a big fork you to cookie cutter solutions. I help busy as fuck neurodivergent entrepreneurs make shit happen by bringing stability to their businesses while helping them do what makes sense to their brain.
Enough with the chit chat. Let's get down to business. What's the frickin' point?
With our powers combined, we navigate life through the drudgery, dreams, and all that shit in between. Plus, we were already having these conversations anyway, so why not record them, right?
Alrighty then. Get ready to call bullshit on what everyone's saying you should be doing as we navigate the spectrum between what your heart wants and the shit keeping you from it.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
How are you? It's episode 7.
I love that number.
I know. Oh my gosh. So we have talked about so many different things over the past, almost 2 months. And I'm really excited for today because we are going to be talking about something BDSM in a light that we normally don't think about. And Angela's so excited about this episode too, because we were talking about this beforehand and she was like, these are all the things we need to talk about. And I'm like writing notes. So here's the thing. Little story. So prior to meeting Angela, anytime somebody said BDSM, I was like, that is not for me. Perfect for you, but not for me. And she's like, no. You need to think about this in a different way. And we started like analyzing relationships, and I was already using the structure of BDSM without knowing it in my personal life. And as I learned more and we uncovered some more things, we realized how beneficial this was in my business as well. So today we're going to be talking about BDSM outside of the bedroom and how it significantly...
And in the bedroom.
Well,
and in the bedroom.
Yes.
But we're definitely reframing.
Yes. And just how this structure provides so much to so many people in all facets of life. So one of the things that we are all about as neurodivergent humans, we definitely kind of look at that words. Disclaimer, Angela and I are both struggling with words this week. So if you just hear immense pauses, I promise the podcast is still working. Our brains just froze. We're buffering. Anyway, so as neurodivergent humans, we kind of like, that's something we are drawn to as queer folks a lot. And so we were talking about the research on this, Angela. So let's talk about that a little bit, because you were like, there's just not a lot.
Right. So let's talk about, first of all, I'm not just pulling this stuff out of my ass. Like, I am coming at this from both a professional, that's actually kind of funny with our topic today. Anyway, needs. But no, I am coming at this from a personal thing, and I'll share some of my personal story and why I even care about this topic, as well as professionally as a certified sexologist. The reason I got into that in the first place was because I wanted to understand sexuality and my own sensory needs at a young age. And I was trying to understand why people around me were weirded out by me liking really tight hugs and, having a relationship with my cousin where he was the only person who understood. And so as soon as I would see him, I would run to him and he would give me the tightest hug. And if we were like sitting on the floor or something, he would like go like this and squeeze my arm, or, rub my shoulders or squeeze my feet really hard. And people had this, we were both young, and people were like, this is inappropriate. There was absolutely nothing sexual with what we were doing, but people put this onto it. So from a very early age, I was hearing this, like, it's weird, like, wanting somebody to squeeze you, and, like, I really like it when people grab, like, really, and I know a lot of people are listening and they're not watching, but I've got my hands up, like, grabbing, because I love it when people, like, squeeze my arm or squeeze my leg. And I hate it when people, like, lightly brush up against it, and,
Oh,
right? So,
yeah, I'm
like,
making
when
the most disgusted face. Ugh.
right? So it's like when we have these needs from very early on that don't have anything related to sex, but we live in such a sexualized society, where sex is thought of as something to be ashamed of, then overlap happens and people start putting labels on things that aren't actually there. So of course my mind, as curious as it has always been, really wanted to understand this. So when I was 15, I was spending time in the library reading everything that I could about human sexuality and trying to understand and, make sure that I'm not doing something wrong, and trying to understand myself and my needs and those of friends who were having discussions with. And, of course, it took forever before I actually professionally went into and got certified as a sexologist, but 30 years of intense study,
Yeah.
understanding this, and then doing, all of the stuff to become certified and actually make that a career, um, was all because of needing to understand BDSM.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, and of course being queer, like, but all of
All the
these things,
pieces.
right? All of these things combined. And then, you go to research the intersections. You can find some research out there about the intersections of the queer community and BDSM in the queer community, but neurodivergence and BDSM, autism and BDSM, there's very, very, very little. And I mean very little. Like, go ahead, Google it. You can find some people's personal stories, but research, very, very little. And that's because the literature has always been focused on, like, club members
Hmm.
and, like, the stuff that you see traditionally on TV that has formed our entire social narrative of what BDSM is, right? So it's a fetish club, or, it's all leathers, or it's unsafe and non consensual relationships, that are characters that are created, without a knowledge of actual practices.
Yeah.
Um, so the average people who can really benefit from these relationships and who enjoy, even if they don't know that that's part of the whole thing and why they enjoy some of these things, they are not represented in the research at all. And that has
Mm.
got to change. That
Right.
has got to change.
Okay.
Soapbox.
So, soapbox. Yes, it was a good soapbox. Um, it was very important soapbox because it really helps kind of understand where we're coming from in this conversation. So we've talked about why research and, like, words. Um, so what I'm trying to get at is, why don't we talk about, like, what the structure is, or, like, the differences between a couple
Okay,
things, so
so
people
first
kind
of
of
all, maybe,
understand.
yeah, let's define
Yeah.
BDSM for maybe somebody who is like, okay, I've heard the term, but I don't really know exactly what it stands for. Okay, so I'm going to break this down. We've got the B and the D. That's bondage and discipline. Then we've got the D and the S. That is dominance and submission. And then we've got the S and the M, which is sadism and masochism. So that's the full spectrum, because guess what? It's a spectrum. People's
Yes.
interests in these different things it's all a spectrum, right? Like what you want. Is it a relationship dynamic? Is it a power dynamic, a play dynamic, a touch dynamic? Um, because we have different factors that affect who we are as individuals. It's a biopsychosocial framework. So, biological factors, psychological factors, social factors. All of these things come into play on our sexuality, what we like and what we don't like. Um, so you can see how being neurodivergent and queer,
Yeah.
why it's important to be having this conversation and um, understanding exactly what BDSM is as far as the overall label. But then let's look at the broader piece of that, the components of that make it so comfortable for many of us. So let's look at the bondage and discipline piece.
Okay.
The bondage and discipline piece um, really comes into play for the sensory needs. Okay.
Okay.
So
I'm
when we
taking
are
notes.
looking at our what?
I'm
Say that
taking
again.
notes.
um, so think about this. Somebody like me who really likes tight squeezes, who enjoys small spaces, like, sitting in the closet or sitting in a corner, even here at my desk. This is a little space that I've created because it's comfortable and cozy. If I have someone who I trust who can help me get into a place, whether it's like tucked really, really, really tightly inside of a blanket, that's really hard to do on your own. But if you have a partner who can do that for you, and let's say you're really stressed out, you come home from work, you've had a really stressful day, and your nervous system is going insane, your partner can take a weighted blanket, they can lay you down, and they can tuck it in really tight around you on the couch or whatever, and maybe even lay on top of you. And okay, this doesn't have anything to do with sex, right? Like,
Right.
we're just coming down from a hard day. But if I can complete that stress cycle and get all of those switches in my head that have been turned off all day, turn off, turn off, turn off, turn off because of stress, those switches now have the capacity to be turned on so that now I can engage in intimate activities. And I'm not just talking about sex, but engage in intimacy with my partner. I may come home and not talk for 30, 45 minutes, an hour because I'm so stressed, and that might be really difficult for my partner. But if we've had negotiation and we have these understandings about ourselves, then we can understand that, and they can understand that, okay, I'm going to give her this really tight, comfortable space. And then we're going to be able to spend time together after. She's going to be able to have a conversation with me after. Um, it's going to be easier for her to go cook dinner, and I like it when she cooks dinner for me. These kinds of things. It matters, right?
Right.
And so that's the bondage piece. The discipline piece of that. Let's just talk, and the discipline is going to go into the dominance and submission too, right? Because we are looking at things like decision fatigue.
Yes.
right? And I know that this is something that we talk about a lot. So why don't I hand it over to you and let you talk about decision fatigue for a minute, and then I'll jump
Yeah.
back in with the BDSM aspect of this.
Okay. So I can come at this from a lot of different standpoints because I am the decision maker for like my family, the extended family, everybody. But I'm also the decision maker for clients because they're meeting this decision fatigue situation. So decision fatigue is essentially where you've made all the decisions or you've done so many things that your brain just cannot make one more decision, where you are like, there is an endless amount of possibilities, or there's even just three possibilities, and I just cannot, for the life of me, whether I want to or not, I cannot make another decision. And if you try and make me make a decision, I am going to lose my shit. Scream, meltdown, whatever you want to call it. I am going to have sensory over, under, whatever load, and I am going to lose my shit. A lot of times in my personal life, when I am helping people make the decisions, because ultimately, if I choose something and somebody has a PDA profile, they're going to be like, fuck you. I'm not doing that shit. You made a decision for me and I don't want you to do that. So most of the times I give forced choices. And this is something I learned with my toddler several years ago. And forced choices are one of my like biggest tools that I use with everybody. Because then I can look at the information as the person that can make decisions from 700 different things most of the time and narrow it down to something that I'm like, oh, I feel like if we condense this down into two different things or maybe three options really at the most, then this person can make a decision. So, Angela, would you like, this green yellow color, or would you like buttercup yellow? And you would obviously tell me you want this
I want the slime green. Thank
yes.
you.
But if I said choose a green from the spectrum of green, you would be like, fuck you, I don't know what I need.
Yeah.
With my toddler, yesterday it was, I can't make a decision, Mom. I don't know. There's too many options. I want this. I want cheesy poofs. That's what it was. I want cheesy poofs. We had no freaking cheesy poofs in the house. Just get them for me, to the point of screaming. And eventually I said, we have noodles or nothing, because the options that you want, we don't have in the house. And I had to give a really hard forced choice for this one because we didn't have anything else in the house. And eventually Blaine was like, I'll have noodles. Calmly. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that I'm talking about with the decision fatigue. Eventually I run out of decisions though too. So then I need somebody else to make that decision. But did I give all the information that you wanted me to give in that paragraph?
I think you gave a very good explanation, especially from a caretaker point of view of decision fatigue. So let's look at it a little bit more.
Okay.
Your gender doesn't matter. Mm-mm. However, we hear this a lot more from women than we do from men because of the social roles that women tend to play, which is traditionally caretaker roles.
Yes.
Again, gender doesn't matter, and this is something that happens for everyone. And although we don't hear the narrative that this happens for people other than women, it absolutely does. So it's important to be aware of this. It's important to be of your own needs, despite what society says your needs should be. So when you've got somebody who works in a job where they have to make a lot of decisions, and then if they come home and they're the decision maker at home as well, it can be extremely overwhelming, and it can cause a lot of angst within a relationship. So if you can negotiate and really define some roles, it's beautiful and powerful and can save a relationship, can make the relationship work differently and better than it ever has before. So in a past episode, I think it was our very first one, we were talking about transitions and
Oh,
how
yeah.
you at home, you're the decision maker, you take care of everybody, you deal with everybody's stress at home. But when you're like doing a big travel kind of thing,
Oh,
Steven kind of takes over, right?
oh, yeah. That is not me.
Right? Like
I'm
he
not that
takes
person.
over and he's able to do a lot of that um, decision making because he's
Yeah.
very good at that
Mhm.
and in that setting.
Right. It is a
Right?
very specific setting.
In that very specific setting. And so that's really important, like, to know in a relationship
Yes.
that at this time you're going to be the caretaker, or you're going to be the more dominant partner, you're going to take a dominant role in this, and I'm going to take a more submissive role in this. And again, that doesn't have anything to do with sex. It
No.
has to do with having trust, consent, negotiation, communication, care, right? Care,
Yes.
communication, and consent. These are the three C's that are like the most important things in the whole world. And they're present within the structure of BDSM, which is why it works so well for so many people. And so, like, when you and I were talking and we were
Mhm.
talking about what works well in your relationship, and it was like, oh, well, this is working well for you. Let's grab onto that. Let's look at this thing that's working well and let's expand it into other areas of your life because we know it works for you.
And it was also like the conversation for me was also Steven or partner is not doing that. Partner is not doing that because they are disrespecting you.
Right.
They're doing it because they don't have the ability to do this in this situation. And you do. You have
Yeah.
this skill set, you have this ability. And that also restructuring for me and being like, in this situation, you are the person who makes the decisions. And for lack of a better term, Steven, that person is the submissive. So sorry. Um,
Because that's what they need.
yes, but we reverse roles in a lot of situations. When it comes to house maintenance and car maintenance and mechanical engineering or understanding how certain things work, I am not that person. It makes zero sense to me. You can talk at me all day, and there is no way I'm making that decision because I don't know. But or traveling, like those, I do not travel well. I mean, I enjoy myself while there. I need booze
Right.
to travel. Um,
Right.
and
And
so
you need
those
somebody
two are
with
important.
you who is supporting you
Yes,
through that travel process because that's what you need. And in order to regulate your nervous system, right? Because this
yeah,
is all about regulation, self regulation, and co regulation, which a
yes,
lot of people don't understand that co regulation, some people misunderstand or misinterpret co regulation and codependence. And
yes,
right, codependency is an unhealthy relationship style, um, whereas co-regulation is healthy, and it's something that we do regularly as people. When people start talking about like the polyvagal response, and I know there's a bunch of um, some people think it's real and some people don't think that it's real, but the whole point of that is that we can co-regulate. um,
yes,
One of the big things of that is look somebody in the eye. For a lot of us, that's not going to work really well, but then for some people, it works really well. So
mhm,
there you go.
yes,
Knowing what this person who you care about, knowing what they need and what helps them and what supports them in different situations, and then being able to provide that in that situation energetically and consensually is
yes,
really important to our overall health individually and in relationships and in the community as a whole.
yes. So let's go back to the consent piece for a minute.
Yep.
It's on my list of things we need to cover.
Right.
And so that was a huge piece for me because I was still new to boundaries because I had zero, which is dangerous. Let us all be clear. Zero boundaries equals danger, danger, Will Robinson. So let's talk about that because it was so much more of understanding that I had control.
Right.
And that I had the ability to say no, especially coming from a place where I have a lot of trauma around certain things, like saying no, and like advocating for myself in certain situations where there's like an authoritarian kind of, not actually, but like my perception of authoritarian figures. Yeah. Perceived authoritarian. Most of the time, these people have no clue that I even see them that way.
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So here we go again. A lot of people think that consent is specifically about sex. And it's not.
Yeah.
And so again, we're bringing in this, talking about how something within BDSM supports other areas of our lives and why it's helpful for neurodivergent people to understand this, but also why so many of us are naturally drawn to it. And I really want to highlight that. And if anybody is listening and they feel ashamed because of these desires that are along this spectrum, I want to tell you that this is all normal. It's very, very normal, and we are drawn to it because it provides us a really safe space, because it is a space that values consent, that values negotiation, and that values communication. And so because of that, it can feel really safe for us. So consent. A lot of people feel that they have to do things, and then they do things at work or with a friend or with family members or with a partner or sexually. And then because they didn't actually want to do that, they come out the other side of it, and it might be right after, it might be during, it might be right after, it might be weeks later, where there are feelings of violation, feelings of being taken advantage of, resentment, bitterness, frustration, anger, sadness. Well, those happen when we do something that is not within our own zone of consent. So it's important that we are able to advocate for ourselves, that we are able to understand what is my zone of consent, so that we can, so that we can have those conversations, we can have the communication, we can have the negotiation. So decision fatigue kind of plays into that a little bit. So sometimes we have to think about it ahead of time and work on it, and maybe make a list of, when I'm feeling decision fatigued, these are the things that I consent to. And then our partner now has something to go off of to support us in that moment. Yes. So our partner can come in and make a decision for us that is within our zone of consent, that we're not going to come back 2 weeks later and be frustrated because that happened. Right?
So this just
what's happening with you, Molly? Because I'm watching your face right now,
and I'm thinking something. Okay, so this kind of brings to the like personal operating manual that you created.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so I feel like this is something we should probably link to for you.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And I did not create this operating manual.
No. but I feel like this is definitely a resource that people could
But
take advantage of.
yes, absolutely. I use the operating manual and I suggest it to people a lot of times, but I did not create it, and I don't have the name right now of who did, but we will post a link so that people can look at
Yes.
it, because it is a tool that I use regularly.
And it feels like this all goes together in that, like, oh, I noticed
Right.
Angela is in a corner, very upset. I need to figure out what the rule is for this one. Like, I
Right.
mean, that's a little like obscure of a situation, but like in some regards, yes, you kind of wrote that for yourself, where this kind of gave you the questions to
Yeah.
answer so that you can be like, oh, in this situation, I am this, and this,
Right.
and this. Like,
Right.
which I feel like is a great exercise for a lot of people to do. Like, because we do that in business. Like, you got a new lead. What do you do next? Oh,
Right.
this is
You have
not
a
good fit.
workflow.
You have a workflow. And a lot of times I'm like, so part of my job as a brand strategist, we're looking at client experience or customer experience, and we're building out workflows. And a lot of times we're actually building out personal workflows. Like,
Hmm.
the person who requested something that was below your price point doesn't mean that they hate you. It actually just means this, like, so how do we process that personally when we feel like somebody's trying to take advantage of us?
Right.
Oh, okay.
How do we make
So
sure we're within our zone of consent and
right,
advocate for ourselves so that we stay within that zone of consent?
right. Yes.
So can you imagine if you have an understanding of the dynamics of BDSM and what it really actually means, and you're able to use the things that you enjoy across that spectrum in your personal relationships, then you can take those skills and move them over to your business relationships and vice versa.
Yeah, and this plays into that executive function piece.
Hugely plays into that executive function piece.
So a lot of us neurodivergent folks really struggle with executive function. We might have a really strong executive function skill set within like one of our special interests or something, but outside of that, we might be like, there's just nothing there. Or some things are there. Wherever you are on that executive function as like a skill thing. But like, I feel like, understanding this BDSM situation really helps you build a plan based off of what you've negotiated with in your personal life, or what in your business or in your work or whatever you need. It allows you kind of to build a system to gain a little bit more in that executive function realm.
It does. And participating in BDSM requires a lot of self-awareness and therefore it promotes self-awareness that we can use in all aspects of our life. And being self-aware does support executive function.
I can give an example if that helps.
I would love if you would, because
okay.
Yes.
You looked like you were having a word search in your brain, and I was like, oh, that's not there. So like in my life, as I learned more about myself and my partner and my kiddo, I realized that we now had words for the things that we were experiencing. I am overwhelmed or overstimulated. I have no ability to make a decision right now. I am over whatever. And so sometimes my partner needs to co-regulate, and I don't have the spoons, the energy, the emotional, whatever to do that. And so what I used to just say is, why the fuck are you touching me? Can you get away from me? Which really translate into, I hate you. I don't want to be around you, which is not what I was going for.
Right.
Or at least that's how it translated to my partner. Now what I say is, I understand that you need help regulating your body right now. And I realize that that happens through touch. I'm really sorry, but today is a day where I'm super overstimulated. And if you touch me, I am going to cry in a ball in the corner.
Yeah.
So I really need you to just let me have my space or I'm going to cry. And that has changed a lot. It doesn't mean, unfortunately, my partner still needs help regulating.
Right.
And if I have the ability to do something, I will. Like sometimes my partner needs me to rub their back. I might only have the ability to touch them with a finger. And that's what I can provide. And that's in my zone of consent. And I'm able to do that in that moment.
And communicate that.
And communicate that. Because sometimes because partners having a nonverbal moment, it will be just like a wiggle. And that means rub my back, I need help. And I know that because we've communicated wiggling means I need help. Sometimes I'm not in the realm to be able to understand the wiggles, but and so I'll be like, I can only do this right now. This is what I can do. Right. And so that helps a lot of communicating needs. And that's that self-awareness piece. By us learning more about our needs and then having conversations in calm moments about those needs and saying, I understand that, but I can't always provide that.
Right.
And having the conversations of, I am the regulator for the whole entire family. Right. Sometimes I cannot help you.
And that specifically is supporting the executive function piece because you're parents. And it's not like you just at the end of the day, the end of the work day, you just get to be like blobs. You can't do that. There are other things. The house has to be taken care of. The, maintenance of whatever has to be done. Taking care of the child has to happen. So somebody has to be able to do that. So when you can work together consensually, where each of you are within your zone of consent, there's no bitterness or resentment happening because you have had these negotiations and conversations beforehand. It makes it doesn't take away, and I want to be really clear here, it doesn't take away the struggles that we have, but it does provide support so that when we struggle, we can get to the other side of that, and it doesn't have to completely freeze us in that moment, which is oftentimes what happens. I am really struggling with words today. I've been up since 2:30 in the morning, and I am struggling big time with finding my words today, which makes me a little bit sad because this is something that I love talking about so much and I am an expert in. But I am really struggling. I'm about ready to cry.
I know, I can tell. But this is to be
because I love it and it's important to me. And I feel like I'm not saying what I want to say.
So much information. I feel like it's okay. This is the intro. I think to what we've said. And I feel like if we stopped here, people will have a lot of nuggets to take away. And it's okay. We can always revisit this later.
Oh, I know. There's I'm looking at all these things oh my gosh, there's so much that I want to talk about. And
but I feel like right now we're showing another example of how we utilize this as friends as well, because you're like, I'm overwhelmed and I can't come up with words. And I'm like, it's okay. We've been here.
And all of the words are, I have words in my head and I can't get these words out. I cannot get them out right now. And it's so very frustrating.
Oh, that is so frustrating. I was just going to say, I will give an example as a parent, how this understanding, the self-awareness, this understanding, these dynamics actually helps in parenting decisions. Not all the time, but a lot of times. Because then I can understand when my kid needs some control. When my kid needs to feel like they have agency in their life, and I can give them that in a safe way.
Right.
And so that is very important. The other thing I was going to say is, going back to the situation we were talking about a few minutes ago with my partner. If your partner has RSD, This does in some ways help a little bit because you have pre-negotiated and talked about, I love you, I understand you, I value you,
Yes.
all of those things. And it allows you the opportunity to have those conversations in non-elevated moments so that when they happen, it kind of de-escalates them a little bit. Not like, as a person who is going to feel rejection so immensely deeply that I cannot imagine, regardless of the intention of the person who is providing a statement that is causing you to have that rejection, like, you are still going to have that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's going to go away, but having this kind of relationship should bring, I know I just shouldn't, could bring you a little bit less. It also helps provide, like for me, I have a lot of friends or family members who have RSD. And so I'm able to say, I don't know how you're feeling today. This next statement might be a little triggering to your RSD. Please choose when the best time is for you. Now, some people are going to be like, now you just set my RSD off and I got to check. But at least there was a warning and you're prepared for the statement. And some people will be like, I am not there right now. And it gives them kind of some agency as well. And so that is kind of a conversation and ability to talk through as well. I feel like we could close here as an intro and we can come back another episode and really dig into this a lot more because we still have disability and all of that to talk about too. But I feel like that in itself is kind of like a whole other episode that we can go into.
Absolutely.
So do you have any last thoughts before we kind of close today?
I think for me, the biggest thing I want people to take away today is that there is this stigma attached, there's this social narrative that has happened, and there is an understanding of BDSM in a really, really, really small way that if we can reframe it and if we can understand it differently, and in a future episode we can talk more about some of the specifics of that understanding, but in doing that, we can really support the relationships that we have or create the relationships that we want.
Yes.
In the bedroom and out of the bedroom. Intimate relationships, work relationships, family relationships, all of that. So come back, keep your mind open, ask us questions, send us questions.
Yes.
Right? We have a question. We have an Ask Us Anything form on our website. And I would love to hear people's specific questions because let me tell you, when I do struggle with words, usually if I get a very specific targeted question, that really helps bring those words out. And thank you, Molly, because you were doing that for me today.
You're welcome.
Right? I'm usually the one that has all of this stuff written down, but you did it today to support me because I'm struggling so much. So thank you for that.
I feel like this was just like a perfect example of how things could go. And like how we incorporated this into our relationship in the podcast. So I feel like this is kind of like a very good example to kind of show people. So, or people can listen to.
Right.
Read.
Yes.
Anyway, so I hope you tune in. Are you good to read or do you want me to close?
Well, what's your last thought on this?
I think that you summarized it just fine.
Okay, then I will close us off. Okay. Thanks for listening to Drudgery, Dreams, and In Between, a weekly live podcast coming to you every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Pacific. Subscribe now wherever podcasts are found. If you'd like to support the podcast, be sure to leave a rating and review and share with your friends. To catch all the latest from us, visit us at drudgeryanddreams.com and follow on your favorite social media platforms at Drudgery and Dreams. Thanks again. See you next time.